Christmas Eve, 1891, Bitterroot Valley, Montana Territory. Midnight came cold and white. Silas Cordell rode through snow that screamed louder than any choir. His horse limped, thrown shoe, maybe worse. So he stopped behind Fletcher's general store where the wind couldn't reach. The building stood dark, closed 3 hours past. He dismounted, checked the hoof by matchlight. Then he heard it, crying, faint, animal sick. He followed the sound to the alley where they kept the refuse barrels. There, half buried in frozen slop and burlap, sat a wooden crate. Inside, 2 infants, blue-lipped, barely moving, wrapped together in a torn shawl so thin it might as well have been shame itself. The church bell rang once, twice, midnight. Silas Cordell owned 40,000 acres, 300 head of cattle, and a house with 12 rooms he never entered. But God had left him something in the trash that couldn't be bought, buried, or forgotten. He didn't think. Lifted the crate, tucked it against his chest. Mounted his lame horse and rode the 2 miles home through wind that cut like broken glass. The house sat dark except for the kitchen lamp Abby always left burning. He kicked the door open, tracked snow across the floor he never noticed, and shouted her name. Abby! Silence. Then footsteps overhead. Quick. She appeared at the top of the stairs in her nightdress and shawl, gray braid loose, eyes sharp. Mr. Cordell, what in God's... He set the crate on the kitchen table. Stepped back. She came down fast. Looked inside. Went still. Sweet Mary. The babies weren't crying anymore. Too cold for that. Their lips had gone from blue to gray. Abby moved like she'd been expecting this her whole life. Snatched blankets from the cupboard, stoked the stove, heated water, tore clean cloth into strips. Her hands didn't shake. Silas stood in the corner, coat still on, snow melting into his boots. How long they been out there? She asked, not looking up. Don't know. They got names? No. And she unwrapped them. 2 girls, identical, maybe 3 months old, maybe 4. Their skin felt like wax. Abby dipped the cloth in warm water, wiped their faces, their hands, checked their mouths for frostbite. One of them whimpered, the other stayed silent. They gonna live? Silas heard himself ask. If they want to? Abby mixed goat's milk with warm water, tested it on her wrist, soaked a rag, held it to the crying one's mouth. The baby latched, drank. Abby nodded once, grabbed a second rag for the quiet one. Silas watched from the corner like a man at a hanging. What are you going to do with them? Abby asked. Still didn't look at him. In the morning, I'll notify Judge Grayson. Orphanage in Helena takes foundlings. Helena's 4 days by wagon. They won't last 4 days. Then Missoula, somewhere. Abby finally looked up. Her eyes carried the same weight they'd carried 12 years ago, when she'd tried to save Sarah and couldn't. When she'd wrapped the stillborn boy in a blanket and told Silas he needed to let them go. They won't survive the night, she said, if someone doesn't hold them. He opened his mouth, closed it. You don't have to do anything. Just hold one, while I tend the other. Abby, Mr. Cordell. She stood, walked toward him with the crying baby bundled in a flour sack towel. I'm 62 years old. I can hold one infant for a few hours. I cannot hold 2. Now take her. He didn't move. She stepped closer. Close enough. He could smell the milk and smoke and something underneath. The raw animal smell of a thing that wants to live. Take her. His hands came up. He didn't tell them to. Abby set the bundle in his arms and stepped back. The baby weighed nothing, less than nothing. Her head lolled against his forearm. Her eyes, gray, or maybe blue, too dark to tell, fixed on his face like she was trying to figure out if he was the kind of man who dropped things. She cried, high and thin and endless. Rock, Abby said, side to side, not hard. He rocked. The baby cried louder. Talk to her. What do I say? Doesn't matter. She just needs to know someone's there. He looked down at the tiny red face, the fists no bigger than walnuts, the mouth open in a wail that seemed too big for a body that small. You're all right, he said, voice rough, unfamiliar. You're all right now. The baby stopped crying, just stopped, mid-breath, stared up at him with those unreadable eyes, her mouth closed, her fists uncurled. Silas froze. Abby looked over from the table where she was feeding the second twin. Her face didn't change, but something in it softened. She knows, Abby said quietly. Knows what? That you won't let go? He stood there, snow melting off his coat, heart doing something it hadn't done in 12 years, pounding not from fear but from the sheer terror of being needed. The baby's eyes drifted closed, her breathing slowed, evened out. She made a soft sound, not quite a sigh, not quite a hum, and went slack in his arms, asleep. He looked at Abby. She was watching him the way she used to watch Sarah kneading bread, like she was seeing something inevitable finally happen. You think you're protecting yourself by feeling nothing, Abby said. But nothing is just another word for dying slow. Silas didn't answer. couldn't. The baby in his arms weighed nothing, but his chest felt like it was being crushed by the weight of every year he'd spent alone in a house too big for ghosts. He sat down, still holding her, still rocking, though he didn't need to anymore. Abby wrapped the second baby, quiet, watchful, and carried her to the rocking chair by the stove. The kitchen filled with the sound of the fire crackling and two infants breathing and the wind outside trying to get in. "What are their names?" Abby asked after a while. "They don't have names." Everything has a name, Mr. Cordell, even things people throw away." He looked down at the sleeping child in his arms. Her face had gone from gray to pink. A little fist had worked its way out of the towel and rested against his chest. "Grace," he said. Didn't know why, just came out. Abby smiled. First time in months. "And this one?" She held up the second twin, the loud one, the fighter. "Mercy," Silas said. "Grace and Mercy." Abby nodded slowly. "Those aren't temporary names, Mr. Cordell. Those are prayers." He didn't answer. Just sat there in his wet coat holding a baby named Grace, while the snow kept falling and the night stretched toward dawn, and something in his chest, something he'd thought dead and buried, started, against his will, to wake. Christmas morning came gray and quiet. Emmett Cross arrived at 9, summoned by Abby, though Silas hadn't asked. He examined the twins on the kitchen table, while Silas stood by the window, watching snow fall like it had something to prove. "Healthy," the doctor said, folded his stethoscope. 3, maybe 4 months old, no frostbite. Somebody kept them alive long enough to give them away. No note?" Silas asked. "Just the shawl." The shawl lay on the chair, torn at the hem, embroidered with something too faded to read. Smelling of cold and neglect, Silas stared at it, looked away. "I'll inform Judge Grayson after the holiday," Dr. Cross said, packing his bag. "He'll arrange transport to the Helena orphanage. Week or so, maybe." "Fine." "You did a good thing, Silas." Silas didn't answer, just nodded once. The doctor left. The door closed. Abby stood at the stove, heating more milk, saying nothing. Silas picked up the shawl, held it to the light. The fabric was thin as a promise. He folded it, set it aside, and went to check the fence line like it was any other day. But it wasn't. A week passed, then 2. The doctor didn't come back. Silas didn't ride to town. Judge Grayson's name stayed unspoken. The twins stayed. He learned their rhythms. Grace woke at dawn, quiet, watchful. Mercy woke at midnight, furious, demanding. They ate every 3 hours. Silas set his pocket watch by it. Abby taught him to mix the goat's milk, test the temperature on his wrist, hold the bottle at the right angle so they didn't choke. His hands, scarred from rope and branding iron, built for breaking horses, learned to cradle skulls soft as overripe fruit. He changed them on a towel spread across the table. Abby showed him once. He fumbled through it 10 times before he stopped shaking. Their skin felt like something that shouldn't exist in a world this cold. He didn't sleep, not really. Drifted between the kitchen and the chair by the stove, listening for the sound of them breathing. If the house went too quiet, he'd wake in a panic, cross the room in 3 steps, press his hand against their chest to feel the rise and fall. Alive. Still alive. Abby watched him from the corner, knitting, saying nothing, but her eyes said everything. On the 10th night, Mercy wouldn't stop crying. Silas walked the floor. 2 hours. 3. Bounced her. Rocked her. Tried the bottle. She screamed like the world had done her wrong, and she intended to file a complaint. "She's fed," Abby said from the doorway. "She's warm. She's just—" "What? Scared?" Silas looked down at the red, furious face. "Of what?" "Same thing you are." He kept walking. Boot heels on the wood floor, back and forth. The fire hissed. Grace slept in the basket by the stove. Mercy screamed. Then, without thinking, without meaning to, he started singing. Low, rough. A hymn Sarah used to hum while she kneaded bread. He didn't remember the words, just the melody. Broken and off-key and not much good for anything. Mercy stopped crying. Her mouth stayed open. Her eyes, wide and gray, locked on his face. She made a soft sound, almost a question. He kept singing. Her eyes drifted closed, her fists uncurled. She sighed once, a long, shuddering breath, and went still against his chest, asleep. Silas stopped walking, stood in the middle of the kitchen. His throat hurt, his eyes burned. He looked down at the tiny sleeping face and felt something crack open in his chest that he'd spent 12 years building walls around. He sat down, still holding her, still humming that broken hymn. When he looked up, Abby was gone, but the rocking chair still moved, slow, back and forth, like a ghost keeping time. On the 14th day, he washed the shawl, boiled water, added soap, scrubbed it by hand at the basin while the twins slept. The fabric came apart in places, old, fragile. He worked carefully, rinsed it 3 times, hung it by the stove to dry. When it was dry, he sat at the table with needle and thread, tools he hadn't touched since Sarah tried to teach him how to mend his own shirts and gave up after he bled on the fabric. He mended the torn hem, clumsy, uneven, but it held. He folded it, set it in the basket with the twins. That night, he wrapped them both in it before bed, tucking the edges around their feet, smoothing it across their chests. Grace grabbed the fabric in her fist, held on. Mercy sighed and turned her head toward her sister. Silas stood there, watched them. His hands smelled like soap and milk and something he couldn't name. Still temporary? Abby asked from behind him. He didn't turn around. Yes. You mended the shawl. It was torn. You named them. They needed names. You sang to her. She wouldn't sleep. Abby stepped beside him, looked down at the twins. Her voice came quiet. Careful. Grace and Mercy aren't temporary names, Mr. Cordell. They're prayers. He said nothing, just stared at the two sleeping faces, identical except for the small birthmark on Grace's left wrist. His throat felt tight. His chest felt full. I'll take them to town next week, he said. Will you? He didn't answer. On the 15th night, he walked past the nursery door. He'd walked past it every day for 12 years. Never touched the handle. Never looked at it longer than he had to. Tonight, he stopped. The door sat closed, locked. The key hung on a nail in his bedroom, wrapped in a handkerchief he hadn't opened since the day he'd buried Sarah and the boy, who never drew breath. He stood there, hand on the wall. The house creaked, settled. Behind him, in the kitchen, the twins slept in their basket by the stove. He reached for the door handle, stopped, pulled his hand back. Not yet, but he didn't walk away, not for a long time. He stood in the dark hallway, listening to the sound of two infants breathing in another room, and felt the weight of the life he'd refused to live, pressing against the life he didn't know he wanted. Finally, he turned, walked back to the kitchen, sat in the chair by the stove. Grace and Mercy slept, wrapped together in the mended shawl, their faces soft in the firelight. He watched them breathe, counted each rise and fall. Tomorrow, he whispered, to himself, to them, to God, maybe, if anyone was listening. Tomorrow I'll take you to town. But tomorrow came, and he didn't. And the day after that, and the day after that. And the shawl, once torn, once thrown away, stayed wrapped around them every night, held together by his crooked stitches and the quiet lie he told himself about temporary things. Late January brought a thaw. Snow melted off the eaves. The road into town turned from frozen stone to mud. Silas heard the wagon before he saw it, wheels grinding slow through slop, horse breathing hard. He was in the parlor, Grace asleep against his shoulder, Mercy awake in the basket, watching dust move through the light from the window. He'd been reading the stock reports. Hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. The wagon stopped outside. Boot heels on the porch, 3 knocks, firm, even. Abby appeared in the doorway, flower on her hands. Judge Grayson. Silas didn't move. Just shifted Grace higher on his shoulder, felt her warm weight, her soft breath against his neck. Show him in. Judge Cornelius Grayson entered the way a man enters a courtroom, like he already owned the verdict. Tall, white beard trimmed, sharp, black coat without a speck of mud despite the road. Gold watch chain, catching the light. He stopped when he saw Silas, holding Grace, Mercy in the basket at his feet. Mr. Cordell, Judge, I've come about the foundlings. Silas stood, slow. Grace stirred but didn't wake. He crossed to the basket, laid her beside her sister, tucked the shawl around them both, straightened, turned. They have names, he said. The judge's eyebrows lifted, barely. Do they? Grace and Mercy. Charming. The judge stepped closer, looked down at the twins. His face showed nothing. Doc Cross informed me you took them in Christmas Eve? A month ago? That's right. I was under the impression this was temporary, until arrangements could be made. It is temporary. Then why, the judge said, voice soft, reasonable, are they still here? Silas said nothing. The parlor felt smaller, warmer. The fire crackled. Outside, a crow called once and went silent. Mr. Cordell? The judge clasped his hands behind his back. I commend your charity, truly. But the Helena Orphan Asylum exists for precisely this situation. Those children need proper care. A structured environment, female guidance, education. They're 4 months old. They won't stay 4 months old. They have female guidance. Abby's been here 20 years. Mrs. Whitehorse is your housekeeper, not their mother. The word landed like a stone in still water. Silas felt it ripple through him, clenched his jaw, said nothing. The judge continued, voice still soft, still reasonable. You're a bachelor, Mr. Cordell. Unmarried men do not raise infant daughters. It's unseemly. Unseemly. You understand my meaning. No, explain it. The judge's eyes sharpened. People will talk. They already are. A wealthy man, living alone, suddenly caring for twin girls? The questions, Let them ask. The scandal. I don't care about scandal. You should. The judge stepped closer, lowered his voice. You have contracts in Missoula, business in Helena, a reputation that allows you to operate beyond the constraints most men face. Do you truly wish to jeopardize that for, he gestured toward the basket, for two nameless children who may not even be orphans, whose mother could return tomorrow? Silas stared at him. The judge stared back. Their mother's not coming back, Silas said. You don't know that. I know. No one leaves their children in trash and comes back for them. Something flickered across the judge's face. Surprise, maybe, or respect, hard to tell. He turned, walked to the window, looked out at the melting snow, the valley stretching white and brown toward the mountains. I'll be direct, the judge said. The law is clear. Foundlings are wards of the court. If the parent cannot be located within 30 days, they are placed in institutional care. It has been 32 days, Mr. Cordell. I'm caring for them. You are not their legal guardian. Then make me one. The judge turned, stared. Pardon? You heard me. The silence stretched, filled the room like water rising. The judge's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold. Mr. Cordell, he said slowly, carefully, adoption requires certain qualifications. A stable household, a wife, a moral foundation that I have a stable household. I have means. I have land. You do not have a wife. Neither do widowers. They raise daughters. Widowers have already been married. They have, the judge paused, chose his words, a history of domestic propriety. You do not. Silas felt heat crawl up his neck. His hands curled into fists. He forced them open, kept his voice level. What do you want me to do? Let them go to Helena. It's the right thing. For who? For everyone, including you. The judge walked toward the door, stopped, turned back. I'm giving you 2 weeks to reconsider. After that, I'll file the necessary paperwork. The children will be removed and placed in care. If you resist, it will go to hearing. And I assure you, Mr. Cordell, you will lose. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in. He paused on the threshold. One more thing. Silas looked up. That door. The judge nodded toward the hallway. The locked one upstairs, what's in there? Silas's chest tightened. Nothing. Nothing? Nothing that concerns you. The judge studied him, long and careful, then nodded once. 2 weeks, Mr. Cordell. Think carefully. He left. The door closed. His boots crossed the porch. The wagon creaked, rolled away. Silas stood in the parlor, stared at the door. His heart hammered against his ribs like something trying to get out. Abby appeared, silent, stood beside him. He'll take them, Silas said. Not if you fight. He's the law. So are you, on your land. Silas shook his head, crossed to the basket, looked down at Grace and Mercy, asleep, wrapped in the shawl he'd mended, their faces soft and untroubled, and completely unaware that the world had just decided they didn't belong here. His hands shook. He knelt, adjusted the shawl, tucked it tighter. Mr. Cordell, Abby said quietly. He didn't look up. Are you doing this for them? She asked. Or for yourself? The question hung in the air. He had no answer. Didn't know if there was one. Maybe there wasn't supposed to be. Grace stirred, made a soft sound. Her fist found the edge of the shawl, held on. Both, he whispered. Abby said nothing, just placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezed once. Left him there, kneeling by the basket, staring at 2 sleeping children and wondering if love was something you earned or something that ruined you just by existing. Outside, the snow kept melting, time kept moving. 2 weeks felt like no time at all. That night, Silas sat alone in his study. The twins slept upstairs with Abby, Grace in the cradle by the window, Mercy in the one by the stove. He'd built both cradles last week, sanded them smooth. His hands still smelled like pine pitch. He poured whiskey, 2 fingers, stared at it. Hadn't touched a bottle since the night he'd buried Sarah. 12 years. The glass felt foreign in his hand. He drank. It burned, tasted like regret and old wood. The shawl lay on his desk. He'd brought it down while the twins slept, told himself he just wanted to examine it in better light, see if there was anything, a mark, a name, some clue to where they'd come from. He lit the lamp, spread the fabric flat. The embroidery in the corner caught the light. Faded, intricate, delicate threadwork forming shapes he couldn't quite make out. Letters, maybe, or just the remnants of something beautiful that time had stolen. He touched it. The thread felt rough, old, like it had been waiting a long time for someone to notice. He poured another drink, didn't sip this time, just swallowed it whole. And the memory came whether he wanted it or not. Winter, 1879, 13 years ago, Sarah in the bedroom upstairs, labor, 20 hours. The midwife had come and gone, said everything was fine, left to tend another birth across the valley. Then the bleeding started. Silas rode for Dr. Cross. Storm hit halfway, white out. Horse threw a shoe, then broke its leg in a snowdrift. He ran the rest, 5 miles. Found the doctor's house dark. He was already out, 2 towns over, wouldn't be back till morning. Silas ran home. Took 3 hours. When he got there, Sarah was still alive. Barely. The baby wasn't moving. He delivered it himself, hands shaking, blood everywhere. She told him how, held his wrist, guided him, screamed once, just once, and then went quiet. The baby came blue, silencent, a boy. Silas tried to make him breathe. Blew air into lungs too small to hold it, rubbed his chest, prayed words he didn't believe. Nothing. Sarah watched, her hand in his, blood soaking through the sheets. Her voice came so soft he almost didn't hear it. "Let him go, Silas." "No, let him go." He wrapped the baby in a blanket, set him aside, turned back to Sarah, tried to stop the bleeding. Couldn't, didn't know how. She just kept emptying out, her skin going white, her eyes going dim, her hand going cold in his. She died at dawn, didn't say anything at the end, just looked at him, like she forgave him, like it wasn't his fault. But it was. He'd left her. Ridden for help that never came. Came back too late. Couldn't save either of them. He buried them together. The boy wrapped in a shawl Sarah had been embroidering for him. The shawl she'd worked on every night by lamplight, humming hymns, telling Silas their son would grow up strong and kind and good. He locked the nursery door, threw away the key, almost. Silas opened his eyes. The study came back into focus. Lamplight, whiskey, the shawl on the desk. His hands were shaking. He looked at the embroidery again, squinted. The letters, he could almost see them now. Something. See something. He poured another drink. His chest felt tight. His throat felt raw. The door opened. Abby stood there. She looked at the bottle, looked at him, closed the door behind her, and sat in the chair across from his desk. "How long you been drinking?" she asked. "Not long enough." She nodded, looked at the shawl. "What are you looking for?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." He said nothing, drank, set the glass down harder than he meant to. Abby leaned forward. Her voice came quiet. "Careful. You think those babies are your penance?" He looked up, met her eyes. Couldn't lie to her. Never could. "What if they are?" "Then you're keeping them for the wrong reason, and they'll feel it." I'm keeping them because no one else will." "No." Abby shook her head. "You're keeping them because if you save them, maybe God will forgive you for the ones you couldn't save." The words hit like a fist. Silas stood, crossed to the window, stared out at the dark. "You weren't there," he said. "I was there after. I saw what you buried." "Then you know." I know you couldn't have saved them. Storm came too fast. Doctor was gone. Sarah knew it wasn't your fault." "She said that?" "She didn't have to. I saw her face when I washed her. She wasn't angry. She was at peace." Silas closed his eyes. "I'm not." Abby stood, walked to him, stood beside him at the window. "Grace and mercy aren't Sarah," she said. "They're not your son. You can't make up for the dead by saving the living. Then why did God put them in my path?" "Maybe he didn't. Maybe it was just chance. Or maybe—" She paused. "Maybe he's giving you a second chance to be the man you were before the grief turned you to stone. But if you keep them out of guilt, Silas, you'll poison them with it." He turned, looked at her. "What do I do?" "You decide. Are you their father, or are you their penance?" She left. The door clicked shut. Silas stood alone. Lamplight, whiskey, the shawl on the desk. He walked back to it, picked it up, held it to the light. The embroidery glowed faint. He could almost read it now. S.C. His breath stopped. No. He dropped the shawl, stepped back, stared at it like it was alive. It couldn't be. He'd buried that shawl 13 years ago, with his son, with Sarah. Hadn't he? His hands shook. He crossed to the bookshelf, pulled down the lockbox he kept on the top shelf, opened it. Inside, Sarah's wedding ring, letters, a photograph, and a key, wrapped in a handkerchief. The key to the nursery. He unwrapped it, held it in his palm, looked at the door to his study. Beyond it, the hallway, the stairs, the locked door at the end of the hall. He hadn't opened it in 12 years. Tonight he would. But not yet. Not yet. He wrapped the key back up, put it in his pocket, picked up the shawl, folded it, carried it upstairs, and laid it over Grace and Mercy where they slept. They didn't wake. Just breathed. In and out. Alive. He stood there, watching them, his throat tight, his eyes burning. "I don't know if I'm doing this right," he whispered. "I don't know if I'm enough, but I'm here. And I won't leave." Grace stirred. Her fist found the edge of the shawl, held on. Silas turned. Walked to his room, lay down in the dark, didn't sleep, just listened to the house settle, the wind outside, two babies breathing down the hall, and wondered if redemption was something you earned, or something that ruined you first. Sunday came cold and bright. The church bell rang at 10. Silas heard it from the ranch, 3 miles out, but the valley carried sound like a grudge. He stood at the window, Grace in one arm, Mercy in the other, both awake, watching him watch the road. Abby appeared in the doorway, already dressed, shawl pinned, Bible in hand. "You going?" she asked. "No. Judge called a town meeting. After service. About the girls." "I know." "Then you should be there." "Why? So I can watch them decide my life?" Abby walked to him, looked at the twins, then at his face. "Bring them," she said. "What?" "Bring Grace and Mercy. Let them see what they're voting on." Silas stared at her. "That's the only chance you have." The church sat on this hill like a white fist. 50 people inside, maybe more. Every pew full. Silas stood at the back, holding the twins, while heads turned and whispers moved through the room like wind through wheat. Reverend Alcott stood at the pulpit, cleared his throat, tried to smile. "Brothers and sisters, we gather today to—" "Let's dispense with the sermon, Reverend." Judge Grayson stood from the front pew, turned to face the congregation. "We all know why we're here." Silence. The kind that presses on your chest. The judge walked to the center aisle, hands clasped behind his back, voice calm, reasonable. "Silas Cordell has, for the past month, housed 2 infant foundlings, abandoned children with no known parentage, no legal guardian, no claim to his care. The law is clear. Such children are wards of the court and must be placed in institutional care for their own protection." He paused, let it settle. "Mr. Cordell, despite his admirable impulse to help, is an unmarried man. He has no wife, no family structure, and while I do not question his intentions, I must question his judgment." Silas felt Grace shift in his arms, felt Mercy's fist curl against his chest. He said nothing, just stood there, let them look. "The Helena Orphan Asylum," the judge continued, "provides education, structure, and proper female supervision. These children will be cared for by trained staff. They will be raised in a Christian environment. They will have opportunities Mr. Cordell cannot provide." Mrs. Beatrice Colton, banker's wife, silk dress, face like a closed door, stood from her pew. "It's not natural," she said, voice high, certain. "A bachelor with infant girls? People will talk." "They already are." Murmurs, nods. Silas felt the room shift. Sheriff Tate stood next, older, graying, good man mostly, but tired. "Law's the law," he said. "Foundlings go to orphanages. Been that way since territorial days. Can't just—" He looked at Silas, something apologetic in his eyes. "Can't just keep children because you want to?" More nods. The weight in the room grew heavier. Then Dr. or Cross stood. "I've examined those children weekly," he said, voice firm. "They're thriving, healthy, well-fed. I've delivered 200 babies in this valley. I've seen how foundlings fare in institutions. Half don't make it past 2 years." He looked at Silas, then at the judge. "Grace and Mercy are alive because Silas Cordell didn't wait for the law. He acted. And I'll stake my license on this. Those children are better off with him than in any orphanage in Montana." Silence. Then Abby stood. She didn't speak at first. Just stood there. 62 years old, half Salish, half Irish, every scar and season written on her face. When she spoke, her voice carried no anger, just truth. "I was there the night Mr. Cordell found them," she said. "I watched him bring them home through a blizzard. I watched him learn to feed them, change them, rock them when they cried. I've worked for that man 20 years. I watched him bury his wife. Watched him lock himself in a tomb he called a house." She looked at Silas, her eyes soft. "Those babies woke him up. He's a father. Not perfect, but present. And if you take them from him, you'll kill whatever good is left in this valley." The room went still. Judge Grayson smiled, thin, patient. "Mrs. Whitehorse, your loyalty is commendable, but sentiment is not law. Mr. Cordell's grief does not qualify him to raise children." He turned to the congregation. "This is a question of order, of propriety, of what is right, not what is convenient." Reverend Alcott stepped forward, nervous, pulled at his collar. "Perhaps," he said, voice unsteady, "we should hear from Mr. Cordell himself." All eyes turned. Silas stood at the back, Grace asleep against his shoulder, Mercy awake, staring at the stained glass window where colored light fell in broken pieces across the floor. "Mr. Cordell," the Reverend asked, "would you like to speak?" Silas looked at the faces, at the judge, at the silence waiting to swallow him. "No," he said. The room stirred, confused, disappointed. Then, Judge Grayson said, "We'll put it to a vote." Reverend Alcott hesitated, looked at Silas. then at the judge, then back at the congregation. "Those in favor of placing the children in the Helena Orphan Asylum," he said quietly, "raise your hand." Hands went up. Mrs. Colton, Sheriff Tate, the banker, the schoolteacher, the widow Frost, the mill owner. More. 20 hands, 30. Silas didn't count, just watched, felt the air leave the room. Those opposed? Dr. Cross raised his hand. Abby raised hers. 3 others. Old man Jessup, the blacksmith's daughter, a young mother in the back. 6 hands. Reverend Alcott's face went pale. He looked at Silas, opened his mouth, closed it. "The measure passes," Judge Grayson said. "The children will be transferred to Helena within the week. Mr. Cordell, you'll be notified of the arrangements." Silas didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there, holding Grace and Mercy while the room emptied around him. People filed past. Some wouldn't meet his eyes, some looked at him with pity, some with relief. He waited until the church was empty except for Abby and Dr. Cross and the Reverend, who stood at the pulpit looking like a man who'd just signed something he couldn't unsign. Then Silas turned, walked out into the cold, down the hill, to his horse. Abby followed. Dr. Cross followed. Neither said a word. Silas tied Grace and Mercy against his chest with the shawl, mounted, looked down at Abby. "I'll fight it," he said. "How?" "I don't know." He rode home. Didn't look back. That night, he sat in the nursery. Dark except for the lamp on the dresser. Grace and Mercy in their cradles. Awake. Staring at him like they were trying to understand why the world felt different. He spoke aloud, voice rough, breaking. "I thought—" He stopped, started again. "I thought if I did the right thing just once, the world would give something back. But it doesn't work that way, does it? Mercy has no friends. Kindness loses votes." Grace made a sound, soft, questioning. "I'm a fool," he said, "for believing—" He stopped, couldn't finish. Grace reached up, her tiny hand, opening and closing. He leaned down, let her grab his finger. She held on, tight. He broke, silent, no sound. Just his shoulders shaking, his face in his hands, tears he hadn't let fall in 12 years finally coming because there was no one left to see and nothing left to save them. The door opened. Abby slipped in, sat beside him, said nothing for a long time. "You think you lost tonight," she finally said. "I did lose." "No." Her voice came soft, firm. "You showed that room what love looks like when it costs everything. They'll remember, even if they voted wrong. The hearing's in 2 days. I'll lose them. Then love them while you can." She put her hand on his shoulder. "That's all anyone gets." Silas looked at her, then at the twins. Grace still holding his finger. Mercy watching him with those gray eyes that seemed to see straight through to the part of him he thought he'd buried. "What if I'm not enough?" he whispered. "You're here," Abby said. That's all they needed to know. She left. The door closed. Silas sat in the dark with Grace and Mercy, in the lamp burning low, in the weight of 2 days pressing on, his chest like a stone. He picked up the shawl, looked at the initials he still couldn't quite read. S.C. Sarah Cordell. Or just a coincidence. Or something else. Some message he was too broken to understand. He wrapped the twins in it, tucked it around their feet, smoothed it across their chests. "I won't leave," he said. "Whatever happens, I won't leave." Grace sighed. Mercy's eyes drifted closed. Outside, the wind picked up. Snow started to fall again. Time kept moving. 2 days. Monday night. The hearing was Tuesday at 10. Silas didn't sleep. Couldn't. Sat in the rocking chair in the parlor, with Grace in one arm and Mercy in the other. They'd been fussy earlier, Mercy crying, Grace whimpering. But now they slept, their weight warm and solid against his chest. The house creaked, settled. The fire burned low. Outside, nothing. No wind, no sound. Just cold and dark pressing against the windows like something waiting. He watched their faces, counted their breaths. Grace's mouth moved in her sleep, dreaming, maybe. Of what? Milk? Warmth? Or did infants dream of things they'd never known? Mothers who held them? Fathers who stayed? Mercy's fist curled against his shirt, held on even in sleep. He thought about tomorrow, the courthouse, the judge, the law that didn't bend. He thought about the Helena orphanage, 4 days by wagon, children in rows, numbers instead of names. He thought about waking up Wednesday morning to a house this quiet forever. His throat tightened. He closed his eyes, opened them. The locked door upstairs stared down at him through the ceiling. He'd passed it every day for 12 years, never touched the handle, never looked too long. The key hung in his bedroom, wrapped in a handkerchief, buried in a lockbox like evidence of a crime. Tonight, he'd open it. He had to. He stood, careful. Carried the twins upstairs to their cradles, laid them down, Grace first, then Mercy, tucked the shawl around them. They didn't wake, just breathed. In and out, trusting. He walked down the hall, stopped at his bedroom door, went inside, opened the lockbox, unwrapped the key. It felt heavier than it should, like it had gained weight over the years, rust on the teeth. The ribbon Sarah had tied around it faded to gray. He walked to the nursery door, stood there, hand on the frame. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. He put the key in the lock, turned it, the bolt slid, clicked, the sound too loud in the silent house. He opened the door. Dust, thick, the air inside tasted old, dead. Light from the hallway lamp spilled across the floor, illuminating shapes covered in sheets. A cradle, a rocking chair, a dresser with small drawers for small clothes. He stepped inside. The floor creaked. He crossed to the window, pulled back the curtain. Moonlight fell pale and cold across everything. He lifted the sheet off the cradle. It was beautiful. He'd built it himself. Oak. Carved the rails with vines and leaves. Sarah had laughed, told him the baby wouldn't care if the cradle was plain. But he'd kept carving anyway, because his hands needed something to do, while he waited for a son who never came. He ran his fingers over the wood, still smooth. Dust came away on his hand. He wiped it on his pants. The dresser held folded clothes, tiny shirts, soft blankets, a knitted cap Sarah had finished 2 days before the labor started. He picked it up, held it, set it back down. On the wall, a framed embroidery Sarah had made. For this child I prayed. And he stood there, stared at the words, felt them press into his chest like nails. I prayed too, he said aloud, voice rough, barely more than breath. Didn't help. Silence answered. The kind that doesn't forgive. He crossed to the trunk in the corner, opened it. Inside, more clothes, a quilt half-finished, a wooden rattle he'd carved, and at the bottom, wrapped in linen, a shawl. He lifted it, unfolded it. The fabric was different from the one downstairs. Similar embroidery, same delicate thread work, but intact, whole. This was the shawl he remembered, the one Sarah had made, the one he thought he'd buried. So, what was the shawl downstairs? His hands shook. He set it back in the trunk, closed the lid. He went to his bedroom, returned with the lockbox, opened it, took out the photograph. Sarah, 7 months pregnant, standing in the doorway of this house, smiling like the world was about to give her everything it promised. He carried it to the nursery, set it on the dresser, propped it against the wall so she could see the room she'd prepared with her own hands. I'm sorry, he said, to the photograph, to the air, to God, if anyone was listening. I couldn't save you. Couldn't save him. I tried. I swear, I tried. His voice broke. He sat in the rocking chair, put his head in his hands. And now, he stopped, swallowed. Now I have 2 more I can't save. So what am I doing? What am I? He looked at Sarah's photograph, her face frozen in that moment of joy, that certainty that everything would be all right. Tell me what to do, he whispered. Please, just tell me. The photograph didn't answer. The room stayed silent, but something in him, something that had been locked as tight as this door, shifted. He stood, walked to the cradle, touched the carved vines, the leaves, the work of his hands when he still believed work could save things. Grace and mercy aren't you, he said quietly. They're not him. Abby's right. I can't trade one life for another. He paused, looked at the photograph again. But maybe, his throat tightened. Maybe they're the answer I didn't know I was asking for. Maybe this is what you'd want. Not replacement, just continuation. He wiped his eyes, crossed to the window, looked out at the valley, white and still under the moon. Snow covered everything. Made it clean, new. I don't know if you're listening, he said to the window, to the night, to whatever God might be out there past the dark. I stopped believing you were a long time ago. But if you are, if there's any mercy left in the machinery of this world, let me keep them. He closed his eyes. Not because I deserve it, I don't, but because they deserve a father who'll stay, who won't leave when it gets hard, who'll show up every morning, even when he doesn't know what he's doing. He opened his eyes. His reflection stared back from the glass, older, grayer, tired. Let me be that, he whispered. That's all I'm asking. The room didn't answer. God didn't answer. The silence just stretched longer and colder and emptier, but Silas didn't move, stood at the window, hands pressed against the frame, heart pounding, waiting for something, a sign, a voice, a certainty that never came. Finally, he turned, looked at Sarah's photograph one more time. I'm going to fight, he said. Tomorrow, even if I lose, I'm going to fight. He left the room, didn't lock the door this time, left it open. Let the moonlight spill into the hallway. He walked to the twins' room, stood between their cradles. Grace slept on her back, arms above her head. Mercy slept on her side, fist curled near her face. He knelt, adjusted their blankets, smoothed the shawl across them. I don't know what tomorrow brings, he said softly. But tonight, you're mine. And that's enough. He stayed there, kneeling between them, listening to them breathe, counting each rise and fall like prayers he didn't know the words to. Outside, the night deepened. The stars turned, time moved toward morning, and Silas Cordell, who'd spent 12 years running from the dead, finally sat still with the living and waited for the light. Tuesday morning, February 14th, 1892, the Bitterroot County Courthouse sat on Main Street like a judgment already passed. Stone walls, narrow windows, a flag that didn't move in the still air. Silas arrived at 9:30, Abby beside him, Dr. Cross waiting on the steps. The twins bundled in the shawl, one in each arm, their faces barely visible in the cold. Inside, the courtroom smelled like old wood and older decisions. 50 people packed the gallery. More than at the church, word had spread. Some came to witness, some came to gawk. Some came because they genuinely didn't know which way mercy should fall. Judge Grayson sat behind the bench. Black robes, white collar, face like granite. All rise, the bailiff said. The room stood, sat. Silas remained standing at the defendant's table, the twins in his arms. Abby beside him, no lawyer, couldn't afford one, didn't trust one. The judge looked at him, long and level. Mr. Cordell, you may be seated. I'll stand. A pause. The judge nodded once. As you wish. He opened the file in front of him, read silently. The room waited. A baby cried somewhere in the gallery. Not Grace, not Mercy, but the sound made every head turn, made Silas hold them tighter. This is a petition hearing, Judge Grayson said, to determine the legal custody of 2 female infants, discovered abandoned on December 24th, 1891, currently in the temporary care of Mr. Silas Cordell. The question before this court is simple. Do these children remain with Mr. Cordell, or are they remanded to the custody of the Helena Orphan Asylum as wards of the state? And he looked up. The law presumes institutional care unless the petitioner can demonstrate clear moral and material fitness. Mr. Cordell, you are the petitioner. The burden is yours. Silas nodded, said nothing. I will hear witnesses, the judge said. Who speaks for Mr. Cordell? Dr. Cross stood, walked to the witness stand, swore his oath, sat. Dr. Cross, the judge said, you've examined these children? Weekly, Your Honor, since they were found. And their condition? Excellent, healthy weight, no signs of neglect or disease. They're thriving. And Mr. Cordell's care? Beyond adequate. He's learned quickly, feeds them properly, keeps them warm, responds to their needs. The judge leaned forward. Doctor, you're a medical man. Do you believe an unmarried male rancher constitutes a proper environment for infant daughters? Doctor. Cross hesitated. Then, I believe a man who shows up every night at 3 a.m. to change diapers and sing lullabies is a better father than most men with wives and wedding rings. Murmurs in the gallery. The judge raised a hand. Silence fell. Thank you, doctor. Abby testified next. Told them what she'd told the church, that Silas had been dead for 12 years, and Grace and Mercy had brought him back to life. Mrs. Whitehorse, the judge said, you are employed by Mr. Cordell. Your testimony may be seen as loyal. It is loyal, Abby said, because loyalty is earned. And that man earned mine the day he stopped running from grief and started running towards something that needed him. The judge wrote something, nodded. Thank you. Then unexpectedly, Reverend Alcott stood. Your Honor, may I speak? The judge looked surprised. Reverend? I voted against Mr. Cordell at the church meeting. His voice shook. I was wrong. The courtroom went still. I've spent 30 years preaching about faith, the Reverend said. About how God works in mysterious ways. About how love conquers all. And when it showed up in front of me, messy, inconvenient, breaking every rule I thought mattered, I voted against it. I was a coward. And I want the record to show Silas Cordell is more Christian than I'll ever be. He sat. The room exhaled. Judge Grayson steepled his fingers, stared at Silas. Mr. Cordell, do you wish to testify? Yes. Approach the stand. Silas looked at Abby. She reached for the twins. He hesitated, then handed Grace to her, then Mercy, walked to the stand, swore the oath, sat. The judge studied him, long enough for the silence to become weight. Mr. Cordell, he said quietly, why do you want these children? The question hung in the air. The room leaned forward. Silas felt every eye on him, felt the weight of the truth pressing against his chest like a stone he'd been carrying for 12 years. Be honest, the judge said. Silas looked at Grace and Mercy in Abby's arms, looked at the judge, looked at his own hands, scarred, shaking, empty. Yes, he said. The judge blinked. Pardon. Yes. I'm trying to replace the family I lost. Gasps. Murmurs. Mrs. Colton stood halfway, face scandalized. The judge raised his hand again. Silence. Silas continued. Voice steady now. Broken, but steady. My wife died 12 years ago, in childbirth. Our son died with her. I delivered him myself. Couldn't save either of them. And I spent 12 years telling myself I'd never risk it again. Never love anything I could lose. He paused, swallowed. But those two little girls, they didn't give me a choice. They cried, and I couldn't walk away. They needed me, and I'd forgotten what it felt like to be needed. His voice cracked. He forced it steady. I'm not a good man, Your Honor. I'm a rich man who spent 12 years hiding. But if you let me keep them, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become the man they already think I am. He looked at the judge, met his eyes. That's all I have to offer. It's not much, but it's the truth. The courtroom went silent. Not the silence of judgment, the silence of something landing true. Judge Grayson sat back, his face unreadable. He looked at his notes, looked at Silas, looked at Grace and Mercy in Abby's arms. Finally, he spoke. Mr. Cordell, the law would say no. Every precedent would say no. Social convention would say no. Silas's chest tightened. But, the judge continued, I have spent 30 years watching men hide behind law when they should have followed conscience. I will not be one of them today. He leaned forward. Petition for adoption is granted. The room exploded. Gasps, shouts, someone clapped, someone else cried. Silas couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Conditional, the judge said, voice cutting through the noise. You will report to Dr. Cross monthly. You will ensure proper female guidance in their upbringing. You will register their names legally within 30 days. And you will remember, Mr. Cordell, these children are not replacements. They are their own souls, with their own futures. Do you understand? Silas stood. His voice barely worked. Yes, Your Honor. Then take your daughters home. The gavel fell. The room erupted. Silas stood frozen. Then Abby was there, pressing Grace and Mercy into his arms. Dr. Cross clapped his shoulder. The Reverend shook his hand, tears in his eyes. Silas held them, one in each arm. Looked down at their faces, Grace calm, Mercy awake and staring at him like she'd known all along how this would end. He turned, walked toward the door. The crowd parted, some faces angry, some tearful, some just watching, bearing witness to the moment Mercy defied law and won. Outside, snow had started to fall, light, soft, the kind that made the world look clean. Silas stood on the courthouse steps, held Grace and Mercy against his chest, felt their warmth, their weight, the proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the world gives back what it takes. Abby stood beside him, said nothing, just smiled. And for the first time in 12 years, Silas Cordell smiled back. That evening, the house felt different. Not louder, not brighter, just alive. Like something that had been holding its breath for 12 years, finally exhaled. Abby cooked venison stew. Dr. Cross stayed for supper. They sat at the kitchen table, Silas with Grace in his lap, Mercy in the cradle by the stove, awake and watching the firelight dance across the ceiling. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. Cross raised his glass, water, not whiskey, and Silas nodded. Abby smiled into her bowl. Outside, snow fell steady and soft. After supper, Dr. Cross left. Abby cleaned the dishes. Silas carried the twins upstairs, bathed them in the wash basin. Careful, clumsy, their tiny bodies slippery as fish, then dressed them in clean gowns and wrapped them in the shawl. He sat in the rocking chair between their cradles. They stared at him, Grace with her calm gray eyes, Mercy with her fists opening and closing like she was trying to grab hold of something invisible. You're mine now, he said quietly. Legal, on paper, Grace Cordell, Mercy Cordell. The names sounded strange out loud, real. Grace yawned. Mercy made a soft sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a coo. Silas reached down, adjusted the shawl. His fingers brushed the embroidered corner, the one he'd looked at a dozen times but never quite read. Tonight, he looked closer. He lifted Mercy from her cradle. She didn't cry, just watched him, and carried her to the lamp on the dresser. Turned up the wick. Light flooded the room. He held the shawl to the flame. Squinted. The embroidery resolved into letters, faded, delicate, old. S.C. Sarah Cordell. His breath stopped. His hands shook. No, it couldn't be. He'd seen the other shawl in the trunk, the one Sarah made. This wasn't... He turned the fabric over, examined the hem, felt something stiff beneath the stitching. His fingers found a small opening where the thread had come loose. He worked it wider, reached inside. Paper, folded tight, yellowed. He pulled it out, set Mercy back in her cradle, unfolded the note by lamplight. The handwriting was careful, feminine, shaky in places. For the man who saved my life when I was a child, I never forgot. When I had nothing left to give my daughters, I left them where I knew they'd find mercy. Forgive me. E.M. Silas stared at the words. Read them again, E.M. The memory came slow, then all at once. 20 years ago. Winter, 1872. He'd been 27, Sarah still alive, the ranch smaller. Money tight, but hope abundant, riding home through a storm. Found a girl, maybe 10 years old, half frozen by the road, her family's wagon overturned. Parents dead in the ravine. She'd crawled out, waited. No one came. He brought her to town, left her with the minister's wife. Gave them money, $50, most of what he had, to feed her, clothe her, send her east to family if they could find any. The girl never spoke, just stared at him with wide, dark eyes, held his hand while the minister's wife led her away. He never learned her name, never saw her again, forgot about it. A year later, when Sarah got pregnant, and the world became nothing but waiting for a son who'd make everything worth it. But the girl hadn't forgotten. Silas sat down hard in the rocking chair. The note shook in his hand. E.M., the girl, the mother. She'd kept the shawl, Sarah's shawl, somehow. Found it maybe, at a church sale after Sarah died. Or the minister's wife had given it to her. Or... It didn't matter. What mattered? The girl had grown up, had daughters, lost everything, and remembered the man who'd saved her when no one else would. So she left her children in his path, wrapped in the shawl, on Christmas Eve, where he couldn't miss them. She'd trusted him with the most precious thing she had. Because 20 years ago, he'd been kind. Silas pressed the note to his chest. His throat closed. Tears came hot and fast and silent. God, he whispered. Not a prayer, just a name, just a sound. He looked at Grace and Mercy. They watched him from their cradles, calm, like they understood something he was only beginning to grasp. Your mother, he said, voice breaking, was brave. He unfolded the note again, read it. Forgive me. There's nothing to forgive, he said. To the note, to the woman who'd written it, to the girl she'd been 20 years ago. You gave them to the only person you trusted. That's not a sin. That's love. He folded the note, placed it in the dresser drawer, beside Sarah's photograph. Two women, two kinds of love. Both leading to this moment. He turned back to the twins. She knew I'd keep you, he said, because I kept her 20 years ago. I didn't know it mattered. Didn't know kindness kept records. Grace's eyes drifted closed. Mercy yawned. But it does, Silas said. Quieter now. It comes back. Maybe not when you expect. Maybe not how you expect. But it comes back. He picked up the shawl, looked at the embroidered initials. S.C. Sarah Cordell. Or maybe it had always been meant for this, for them. For the moment when the past circled around and became the future. He draped it over both cradles. A bridge between them. Your mother loved you enough to let you go, he said. Your grandmother made this with her own hands. And He stopped, breathed. I'll make sure you know them both. Through stories, through this. He touched the shawl. Through the fact that you're here, alive, loved. Mercy's hand found the fabric, held on. Silas sat back in the rocking chair. The lamp burned low. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, two babies breathed steady and calm. He closed his eyes, let the tears come. Let the weight of 12 years lift, not all at once, not completely, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't only cruel. Maybe it kept score. Maybe kindness mattered. Maybe a man who'd buried his heart could learn to live again. If two tiny heartbeats reminded him what living meant. He opened his eyes, looked at Grace and Mercy. Thank you, he whispered, for coming back. They slept. He watched. The night deepened. And for the first time since Sarah died, Silas Cordell felt something that wasn't grief or guilt or the grinding weight of loneliness. He felt grateful. May 1892. The valley turned green like a promise kept. Snow melted off the high peaks. Wildflowers came up, lupine, Indian paintbrush, arrowleaf balsam root, turning the meadows gold. The creek ran high and cold. Cattle moved to summer pasture. The world remembered how to grow things. Grace and Mercy turned 1-year-old. They crawled now, fast. Silas spent half his day chasing them across the parlor floor, pulling them away from the fireplace, the stairs, the dog who tolerated their grabbing with the patience of a saint. Mercy laughed, full-throated, delighted, at everything. Shadows on the wall, the cat's tail, her own feet. Grace smiled quieter, watching first, then joining in like she needed to make sure it was safe before committing to joy. Silas had never been so tired, or so alive. One morning, Mercy knocked over a glass of milk at breakfast. It shattered on the floor, white pooling across the wood. Mercy stared at the mess, face crumpling, ready to cry. Silas looked at the glass, at the milk, at her, then laughed. First time in longer than he could remember. Not a chuckle, a real laugh, deep, surprised by itself. Mercy stopped mid-cry, stared at him, then laughed too, high and bright and contagious. Abby appeared in the doorway, looked at the mess, looked at him laughing, and shook her head. Your grandmother, Silas said to Mercy, wiping his eyes, threw a whole pot of stew at me once. You come by it honest, Grace babbled from the high chair. Mercy clapped her hands. The dog licked up the milk. Silas cleaned the glass, mopped the floor. His back hurt. His hands smelled like soap and sour milk and baby drool. He'd never been happier. The town softened, slowly. A thaw nobody announced, but everyone felt. Mrs. Colton brought hand-knitted booties. Didn't apologize exactly, just handed them over, said the girls would need them come winter, and left before Silas could thank her. The blacksmith's daughter asked if she could visit, came twice a week, helped Abby with washing, played with the twins on a blanket in the yard. Grace loved her. Mercy tolerated her. Sheriff Tate tipped his hat when Silas rode through town. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Even Judge Grayson nodded once from across the street, something almost like respect in his eyes. Reverend Alcott asked Silas to read scripture on Sunday. Silas declined. But he attended service for the first time in 13 years. Sat in the back pew with Grace and Mercy, who squirmed and babbled through the sermon. Nobody minded. Afterward, people came up. Not everyone, but enough. Shook his hand, touched the twins' heads. Said things like, they're beautiful, and you're doing right by them, and God bless. Silas just nodded. Didn't know what to say. Thank you felt too small. Everything else felt too big. One evening, after the twins were asleep, Silas sat at his desk. He pulled out paper, pen, ink, wrote slowly, carefully. Dear Sarah, I'm a father. I didn't think I'd get to say that again. They're not ours by blood, but they're ours in every way that matters. Grace has your eyes. Mercy has your stubbornness. Both of them have your capacity to make me feel like maybe I'm not as worthless as I thought. I'm teaching them the songs you used to sing. Badly, but they don't seem to mind. I tell them about you, that their grandmother was the kindest woman who ever lived, that she would have loved them. I miss you. I'll always miss you, but I'm not alone anymore. And I hope, that would make you glad. I'm trying, Sarah. I'm trying to be the man you always believed I could be. Some days I fail. Most days, probably. But I show up, and that's more than I've done in 12 years. Thank you for loving me when I didn't know how to love myself. Maybe that's why Grace and Mercy are here, to teach me what you couldn't finish. I hope you're at peace. I hope you know I finally am too. Silas. He folded the letter, placed it in the lockbox with the photograph, the ring, the other things he kept because letting go completely wasn't possible yet. Maybe it never would be. Maybe that was all right. He closed the box, left it unlocked. Late May. Afternoon sun warm on the porch. Silas sat in the rocking chair, Grace on one knee, Mercy on the other. They watched the valley, green and wide and full of light. Dr. Cross rode up, dismounted, climbed the steps, sat on the rail. Monthly check, he said. They're fine. I know. But the judge said monthly, so monthly it is. He examined them anyway, listened to their hearts, checked their teeth, 2 coming in for Mercy, 1 for Grace. Pronounced them healthy, strong, thriving. You're doing well, Silas, he said. Packed his bag. Silas looked at him. Took me 47 years to figure out what mattered. Better late than dead. They sat in silence, watched the sun move toward the mountains. You ever regret it? Dr. Cross asked. Keeping them? Silas looked down at Grace and Mercy, Grace chewing on her fist. Mercy, grabbing at a bee that drifted past, laughing when she missed. Every morning I wake up tired, Silas said. Every night I collapse, my back hurts. My hands are always sticky. The house smells like milk and soap and diapers. He paused, smiled. Best year of my life. Dr. Cross nodded, stood, clapped Silas's shoulder. See you next month. He rode off, dust rising behind him. Silas sat with the twins. The valley stretched out below, green, alive, endless. Somewhere out there, the woman who'd left them was gone. Dead, maybe, or just lost. He'd never know. But she'd trusted him, and he'd earned it. Grace leaned her head against his chest. Mercy babbled something that sounded almost like "da." Silas's throat tightened. He kissed the tops of their heads, held them close. I've got you, he whispered, for as long as you'll let me. The sun dipped lower. The shadows grew long. Inside, Abby started supper. The smell of bread and stew drifted through the open door, and Silas Cordell, who'd spent 12 years believing the world had nothing left to give him, sat on his porch holding 2 miracles and finally understood what Sarah had known all along. Love wasn't something you lost, it was something you chose. Every day, even when it cost everything. Especially then, Christmas Eve, 1892. Snow fell, the kind that erases the world and makes it new. Inside, the house glowed. Fire in the hearth, lamps lit, supper finished. The smell of pine and cinnamon and something warm Abby had baked. Dr. Cross sat by the fire, reading to Grace from a picture book she couldn't understand but loved anyway. Mercy climbed across Silas's lap, trying to reach his pocket watch. laughing every time he moved it just out of reach. At midnight, the church bell rang. Silas stood, carried the twins to the window, wrapped them together in the shawl, mended, washed soft, held together by his crooked stitches and something stronger than thread. Grace touched the cold glass. Mercy watched the snow fall like she was seeing magic for the first time. "A year ago," Silas said quietly, "you came to me on a night like this." He paused. Grace looked up at him, her gray eyes steady, knowing. "The world said you were nothing," he continued. "But you taught me." Mercy grabbed his face, laughed. He smiled. "You taught me that love isn't something you lose. It's something you choose." He kissed their foreheads, held them close. Behind him, Abby stood in the doorway. Dr. Cross closed the book. The fire crackled. Outside, snow fell silent. Silas carried the twins upstairs, laid them in their cradles, tucked the shawl around them both. They didn't fight sleep tonight, just watched him with those wide, trusting eyes until they drifted closed. He stood between them, listening to them breathe. The nursery door, once locked, once feared, stood open. Sarah's photograph on the mantel caught the lamplight. Silas turned down the lamp. Firelight glowed beneath the door. Soft baby sighs filled the room. He whispered into the dark, "Thank you," then closed the door, gently. From inside, a sound, soft, light, Mercy laughing in her sleep, and the house that had been a tomb for 12 years was finally, quietly, completely home.